This is the Cato Daily Podcast for Friday, July 17th, 2020. I'm Caleb Brown. Roger Stone, a longtime advisor to then-candidate Donald Trump, had his prison sentence for campaign-adjacent crimes commuted by President Trump. Just how broad is the presidential pardon power? Cato's Gene Healy discusses the presidential pardon, Roger Stone, and the remote but real possibility that this president will find a way to pardon himself on the way out of office. Although I think I have some technical quibbles with the documentary Get Me Roger Stone, I thought it was very entertaining and probably fundamentally pretty fair to the guy. Mitt Romney has called this commutation unprecedented, historic corruption.
And I'd go with corruption. It definitely has an odor to it, particularly since there is at least a suggestion, hints of it by the president himself, who praised Roger Stone on Twitter for not flipping and ratting. And, there is a question as to whether Stone's testimony would have contradicted some of what Trump gave to the special counsel investigation in written answers as to what he knew about WikiLeaks and the Stone's attempts to be a go-between with WikiLeaks during the 2016 campaign. So there's definitely an element of self-dealing here, but unprecedented, I think, goes a little far. I don't even think it's unprecedented in recent history. There have been a lot of grotesque and corrupt pardons. Bill Clinton pardoned Whitewater figure Susan McDougal, who'd gone to jail for contempt of court after refusing to testify against Bill Clinton. He also, on the last day of his presidency, I believe, pardoned this guy, Mark Rich, who was a federal fugitive who's probably not coincidentally, who had arranged through his wife for massive, I think, $500,000 donation to the Clinton Library Fund. So this certainly is not the first example of even in recent history, of a president using clemency powers in a way that stinks to high heaven.
So pardons, and correct me if I'm wrong, pardons are a part of the criminal justice system. That is, if all of the other checks on the ability of the government to indiscriminately, or in some cases discriminately in the wrong way, put people in jail, if all of those fail, there's this. That's how I've long understood the pardon to work. Am I wrong?
Well, sure. I mean, one of the basic ideas behind it, Hamilton talks about this in everybody's favorite framer now. Not mine, but the newly popular Alexander Hamilton. He talks about this in Federalist 74 about the pardon power, and it's there for reasons of what he calls humanity and good policy. It's supposed to be, in a sense, this safety valve that can mitigate the harshness of the federal criminal justice system. It can also be used in times to bring social peace in times of civil unrest with a well-timed offer of pardon, which is something quite like what George Washington did during the Whiskey Rebellion. Hamilton calls it the power to pardon a benign prerogative, and he says it ought to be unfettered and lodged in a single man of prudence and good sense, that is, the president. So this is another area maybe where things haven't exactly worked out according to plan.
Prudence and good sense, yeah. The founders knew that this pardon power could be abused and quite possibly would be abused.
Yeah, they this idea that this sweeping power, they were well aware that a power this sweeping could be used for self-dealing. That it could be used in self-interested cases, and they explicitly discussed it. It wasn't news to them. There's an exchange between George Mason and James Madison about this very topic at the Virginia Ratifying Convention, where Mason says that, well, what if the president pardons crimes that he himself advised to be committed? And Madison says, well, if he's connected in any suspicious manner with any person in that way, he can be impeached and removed. So uh, the remedy for this abuse of this broad power was you impeach the president and remove him from office. Uh, two plus centuries later, that has turned out to not be an entirely practical solution.
You talked about sort of quelling unrest. Is the pardon of Richard Nixon part of that? Could that be construed there, or could that be construed as corrupt?
That's one you could. People have said, have been on each side of that case. Gerald Ford certainly justified it as this was a way to put our quote unquote long national nightmare behind us. But it was not, you know, pretty unpopular at the time, and there were suspicions. I don't think ever proven that there was, some sort of corrupt bargain before the pardon was issued. Ford actually voluntarily testified before the House of Representatives about the reasons behind that pardon, and he paid a price for that pardon. It's probably more than anything what led to his defeat in 1976 against Jimmy Carter. Uh, yeah, you could see that either way. Another example would be Jimmy Carter himself issued a blanket pardon for amnesty for draft evaders. He justified that as a way of putting the social upheaval over Vietnam in the rearview mirror. So it has been, the pardon power has been controversial historically, but you definitely have seen a trend towards more self-interested uses of the pardon power, and in recent administrations, fewer uses of the pardon power for really anything else.
All right. With respect to Donald Trump, then, he has used the pardon power pretty sparingly, but for pretty high profile people, both high profile in the sense that they are not well liked by the broad public, such as Joe Arpaio,
Uh-huh.
and people who I think everyone agrees should not have been in prison, Matthew Charles and Alice Johnson.
Right. There's a very interesting analysis of Trump's pardon record over on the website lawfare.com, by Jack Goldsmith, the Harvard law professor, and Lawfare's Matthew Gluck. And they look at each. Trump has so far issued a total of 36 pardons slash commutations in his 3+ years in office, and they analyze them according to a number of different criteria, two of which are, did he hear about this case from television or a television host, and did a celebrity tell him about it? These are probably not criteria that would be used in the analysis of past presidents' pardon records. On the other hand, you mentioned Alice Johnson, who's a 63-year-old woman who is serving life for a nonviolent drug offense. That was a case that was brought to Trump's attention by Kim Kardashian, and it's actually one of the few pardons that he's issued that I think really fits within the original idea of relieving some of the harshness of the criminal justice system. So I don't know. Maybe President Trump should talk to celebrities more often about who to pardon.
Yeah, I mean, she's gotten more people out of prison than I have. With respect to future pardons that we expect, either if in the case of defeat in November, or a second term, where at the end we always see these sort of midnight pardons of presidents don't seem to want to use political capital to make use of the pardon power until their term is effectively over. The names that are floating out there are Paul Manafort, people who were convicted of things that related somewhat to the Trump campaign itself. And of course, Trump himself has asserted the power to pardon
Yeah.
himself.
Donald J. Trump is another name that's floating around out there. He's tweeted out that he has the absolute right to pardon himself. Um, yeah, that could be interesting. So, in recent years, these self-dealing pardons, controversial pardons, like the Mark Rich pardon by Clinton, George H.W. Bush's last-minute pardon of six, I think, Iran Contra defendants. They've been right at the end of a president's last term, lame duck, or he's term limited out, as in the case of Clinton. Um, Donald Trump is not afraid to issue controversial his first pardon, I believe, was Joe Arpaio. He is not really constrained by this sense of uh, embarrassment about self-interested or controversial pardons, and so that's one. There are a lot of people tend to want to there's a lot of hyperbole. Donald Trump's a hyperbolic character himself, and he tends to provoke hyperbole among his opponents. So you hear a lot of worse than Nixon. Even Nixon wouldn't do this. The one area that I think will be interesting to watch is if he loses re-election, and on the way out the door, he tries something that even Nixon, though he considered it, uh, in the end decided was too crazy, which is to attempt to pardon himself. That's something that in the final days of before he resigned in August 1974, that Nixon had thought seriously about issuing himself a pardon. No president before or since has ever tried this. Uh, there's a not insignificant chance that Donald Trump will be the first president to make a go of it.
Gene Healy is a vice president at the Cato Institute. Subscribe to the Cato Daily Podcast wherever you please and follow us on Twitter @Cato Podcast.